Hey Social Studies team, now that you have had the opportunity to watch the overview of Making Thinking Visible, you should have a basic understanding of how each routine works. I wanted to give you experience with these thinking routines using Social Studies content. For the next few minutes, you will be wearing several different thinking caps. The first cap is that of learner. You will have the opportunity to practice these thinking skills in a series of mini lessons in this virtual Social Studies classroom. The second thinking cap will be one of teacher. In this role, you will need to be thinking of how you can include these thinking routines in your lesson design. I know that through discussions in your PLCs, you will have the time to work on this thinking and truly see that these thinking skills do become routine in your classroom. We will begin by taking a look at two of the introducing and exploring ideas routines, Think, Puzzle, Explore, and the explanation game. Imagine, if you will, that you are now sitting in a 9th grade world geography classroom. We are studying the unit on Africa south of the Sahara. This is where you put your learner's thinking cap on, and you're actually going to take the role of the student. Do the actions that are indicated in this mini lesson. What do you think you know about human-environment interaction in Madagascar? I'll give you 10 seconds to think about it as the facilitator pauses the video. Jot down your thinking on a sticky note. Now that you've jotted down your thinking, it's time to share what you know about this topic. The facilitator is going to pause this video and allow you to share your thinking about the human-environment interaction in Madagascar. Go! Now we're going to watch a video about human-environment interaction in Madagascar. As you watch it, keep in mind that I'm going to ask you, after you've seen it, what puzzles do you still have about human-environment interaction?
There's not a lot left here. This stuff's not coming back in our lifetimes. It's not coming back in 100 lifetimes. The human population here is larger than it's ever been, and the remaining forests are fewer than they've ever been. Madagascar has less than 7% of its original forests remaining. 93% plus of the natural forests of Madagascar have disappeared. Here in Madagascar, the human impacts on nature take many, many forms. They take the form of slash and burn agriculture, so people can grow rice to survive, clearing entire swaths of forest so they can have food. They take the form of firewood use. They take the form of setting fires to burn off these savanna grasses so that people can herd their cattle and feed their cattle on grasses. So the realistic way forward is through sustainable resource management. We try to achieve that natural balance so that the resources that are here that support life, biodiversity, human life, all together can coexist indefinitely. Within a particular generation, this generation, we can alleviate a lot of the pressures on the forests for slash and burn agriculture. We've done that in the form of ecotourism development. They have to rely less on what they can grow themselves, and they can have a means to buy their food that comes from somewhere else. Fuel wood. We've addressed this through rocket stoves. Traditionally, people cook their pots over open fires. So much of that heat is just wasted and lost out the side or around the edges, and by providing a very simple means to direct all of that energy into the bottom of the pot, not only do things cook faster, but less fuel is used. With the educational aspects of our projects, entire communities are galvanized to not be the exploiters of the resources, but the protectors of it. This is is not just about a single forest. This is about the planet. What goes on here is a microcosm of the rest of the entire world. We're just one small part of this large sphere of life. The decisions that we make as individuals, as the arbiters of the fate of the forest in which we live, the planet in which we live, is a great responsibility. But those decisions that we make will impact our survival.
Thanks for watching the video. Now, what puzzles do you have about human-environment interaction in Madagascar? What are you wondering about? Are there things about this topic about which you are curious? The facilitator will take a moment and pause the video so you can share with your neighbor what puzzles you still have about this topic. How can we explore these puzzles? Who might you ask? What sources would be worth tapping into to find the answers? Take a moment to share the thinking on exploring these ideas as the facilitator pauses the video. Remember that as the teacher, you might set the scene to indicate that human-environment interaction is a major concept in play in Africa south of the Sahara. You might be looking for connections to other locations in Africa which have similar or different types of human-environment interaction as we begin our study of geography of this region. Now we're going to experience a mini lesson using the explanation game. You have just magically been transformed into a classroom full of 8th grade American history students. Today we're going to play the explanation game. You're going to take a look at the following objects. With a partner, you will take time to see all that you can possibly see. Point out to one another the things that you observe. In other words, name the features you see. Then explain it to your partner. Just where or what do you think it could be? And give us some reasons. What makes you think that explanation? If you think it could be something else because of what you see, then write that down too. Here come the objects. Be prepared to share your thinking of naming and explaining with your partner. Here's the first object. What do you think it is? Can you name it and explain it? Here's object number 2. What do you think this is? Can you see it? What do you see? What do you think it depicts? Object number 3. What do you see? What's in this place? Where do you think this place might be? Object number 4. What could this possibly be? Why is it important or significant in history? Name what you see and give me some explanations that you can think of. Object number 5. What is this? Where might it be? Why is it significant? Name it and explain it to your partner. And the 6th object. What are they? What do you think they are important? What do you see? How can you explain it? If the facilitator would take a moment and pause the video to give you time to look in detail, you can share with your partner. Normally this would be done in a gallery walk, but you can just do it from your seat with your shoulder partner. Take a moment and share what you saw or named, how you might explain where or what it is. What are the reasons behind what you think? Could it be something else? What makes you say that? The facilitator is going to pause and let you share right now. Don't forget to share the reasons behind your thinking. And I'm going to give you a question. What do you think all these objects have in common? Let's take time to think about it now. In introducing and exploring ideas, we had a mini lesson using Think, Puzzle, Explore, and Explanation Game. Take a few minutes and think through how you might incorporate these routines in your lesson designs in lessons coming up in the next few weeks. We'll give you time to think about it and talk about it with your department members. The next two routines are in the synthesizing and organizing category. Headlines and I used to think, now I think. These two routines are really embedded in deep, rich instruction, and it is a little bit artificial to try to do that in a setting where you haven't received that deep, rich instruction. So I'm going to set a scenario for you, then we can jump right into it, as if it had happened. Using headlines, we're going to make a short journey home to Texas. Now you are in the 7th grade. We've been studying the events of March 1836. Write a headline for one of the events in Texas during this time that captures an important aspect or core idea we want to remember. Don't forget, you have to share your thinking, the reasons behind what you wrote. The facilitator is going to pause and give you time to write your headline. If you want to bump it up a notch in sophistication, you can write it from different points of view. Some of you might want to take the point of view of the Texans. Some of you might want to take the point of view of the Mexicans in March of 1836 in Texas. Ready? Write. In exploring I used to think, now I think, you are going to be sitting in an 11th grade U.S. history class studying World War II. We've been studying President Truman's decision to drop the atomic bomb, looked at video footage of the devastation, and analyzed the data on casualties. Now we're going to watch a video of a historian giving his perspective. Take a look at this video, and then we'll show our thinking.
The atomic bomb was first successfully detonated at Alamogordo on the 16th of July 1945. It was used less than 3 weeks later operationally, 6th of August 1945. There was no debate as to the morality of it whatsoever at the time. Remember, the Americans had actually spent 3 years, $2 billion, employed something like 800,000 people to actually develop this weapon system. And now they had it. And there was every possibility that this might actually bring the war to an end very quickly indeed. Had they not used the bomb, there would have been investigations, there would have been questions in Congress, there would have been committees of inquiry. And indeed, if they had not used the bomb, and America had suffered hundreds of thousands of casualties in an occupation of Japan, and if then it had to fight a guerrilla war running on to the 1950s and 1960s, well, one could have seen, Truman impeached had the bomb not been used. It would have been regarded as an act of criminal folly not to have used it. Many people say that the decision to use the atomic bomb was immoral. I disagree with them completely. I think it would have been immoral not to use the bomb. And the reason is this. The people whose lives it saved, the most people whose lives were saved by that bomb, were not Americans, they were Japanese. Because if the Americans had invaded, if the Japanese had resisted, then Japanese civilian casualties would have gone off the scale. I mean, we know how many Japanese died on Okinawa. Now we can extrapolate on the basis of those figures. We're talking about at least 2 million Japanese civilians being killed, perhaps many, many more being killed. And ultimately, in these sorts of calculations, your morality comes down to numbers. 70,000 Japanese die in Hiroshima in the first instance, perhaps another 50,000 die of the after effects of radiation, of cancers that they wouldn't normally have suffered, and so on. Another 30 to 35,000 that die in Nagasaki, roughly the same number from the after effects. And all these people up together, it's horrendous, horrendous deaths. But they're nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to the millions who would have died as a result of an American invasion. In the 1960s and 1970s, there was a great deal of revisionism, historical revisionism. And there were a number of arguments put forward. There was one that claimed by the United States Navy that the submarine blockade was effectively starving Japan, and that Japan was going to collapse anyway as a result of the submarine blockade. And the Navy would say that, wouldn't they? Because the Navy, of course, is looking at appropriations for its submarine fleet. There's very little evidence to suggest that Japan was anywhere close to surrender. Yes, people were starving. They'd have gone on starving. Their fighting spirit was still very, very strong indeed. And then the elements within the US Air Force said, that conventional strategic bombing had already done the job, and that there was really no need to use the atomic bombs. And this is simply untrue. The importance of the atomic bombs was not the effect that it had on the Japanese civilian population per se, it was the effect that it had on Japanese elite opinion. It was the second bomb on Nagasaki, 9th of August, 1945, that convinced the warlord who controlled Japan's destinies, Emperor Hirohito, that the game was up. Without that, it's very doubtful that Hirohito would have agreed to hold the Imperial Conference, which decided to end the war. Other people were saying that it was the Soviet invasion of the 9th of August, 1945, which coincides with the Nagasaki bomb, which actually brings the war to an end. How can we possibly make that kind of distinction? Hirohito had one shock after another. First the news from Nagasaki, then the news that the Soviets had ended Manchuria. I think it was this double whammy that finally broke his morale.
Thanks for taking time to watch that video. Now remember, in our scenario, we've studied lots of different information from different perspectives and different points of view. Once that instruction has taken place, you would ask the students to complete a written statement using the prompt, I used to think blank, and now I think blank. And they will fill in the blanks with their thinking. This should show how their thinking either stayed the same or changed over time. Pause the video here and give people time to write their answer to I used to think, now I think about the atomic bombing. Did someone's thinking shift? What information changed your opinion? Share your responses out with the people in your department. In synthesizing and organizing, we looked at headlines and I used to think, now I think. Both of these are low prep, high return thinking routines. How might you use these routines in your classroom in upcoming lessons? Take time and share out your responses. The simplest and perhaps most powerful of the digging deeper routines is, what makes you say that? Our one last stop today is in a world history class. The What Makes You Say That routine is a simple questioning routine that you can ask any student to reveal the thinking behind an assertion, an opinion, or a stance. Let's say we have a brilliant world history student at Haltom High School who says, I believe that the Egyptian Nile civilization was the greatest of all the early river civilizations. Then a smart teacher might say, what makes you say that? And ask the student to delve deeper or dig deeper into their thinking to provide the reasoning behind what they're saying. Use this strategy to dig into that thinking. You will probably even want to layer it with the other routines that we've studied today. So take a few minutes and talk about making what makes you say that a part of your everyday discourse with students. How will you use this routine? Thanks so much for participating in these virtual mini lessons using thinking routines. Don't forget to embed these routines with regularity in your lesson design. They will become a part of the lesson planning format in Forethought. Signing off. Talk to you later. Julie.